Well, after a season full of exorcisms and many scary happenings, the season of Outcast is now ended, but of course I am behind 4 episodes, so let's talk about the last 4 episodes of Outcast as a whole. Hey guys, camera for the final 4 episodes of Outcast, episodes 7 through 10. Now, let me explain, because I never intentionally meant for myself to get behind. In fact, as you guys know, this is probably my favorite news show of the summer, and it still is after these 4 episodes, even more so after these 4 episodes, which I'll talk about, but basically what ended up happening is that I was going to watch the 7th episode, you know, and review for you guys that week, but it took forever to finally come online, because as you guys know, I don't have Cinemax. It's not one of my cable providers, you know, it doesn't come in the cable provider I have, it does not come in that you have to order it, and we already have HBO and Showtime, so we don't pay for Cinemax, and I'm forced to watch Cinemax, you know, online, and it took forever for it to come online, I remember I was going to watch it that weekend, but other things got in the way, and I had other things to watch, and unfortunately, because that never got to watch episode 7, then I'm like, alright, I'll watch episode 7 and 8, but that one took forever, and then finally, this week, I'm like, alright, I'll watch episodes 7, 8, and 9, and then get to the 10th one, but as you guys know, my computer ended up, you know, not working, my keyboard stopped working, I needed to fix my computer and everything, and that's why I'm catching up, but now, anyways, let's finally talk about the last 4 episodes of Outcast, because I really do want to talk about it, and let me just say, holy shit, I mean, there is a lot to talk about in these last 4 episodes, and I have to say, these last 4 episodes, I think, were among the best. I absolutely love these last 4 episodes, and I've loved this entire season, but damn did they give it their all. They really put, I think, their heart and soul into these last 4 episodes. They gave it everything they possibly could. So much tension, so many great twists, and so many things that I think we kind of knew were going to happen, but was just really interesting to watch them happen, and I really did love the way that was done. But of course, if you guys don't know, I'll talk about episode 7, then I'll talk about episode 8, then 9, and then I'll talk about the season finale and everything. But let's, of course, start off with talking about episode 7. So as you guys know, episode 6, I wasn't the hugest fan of. I mean, I think it was a good episode, but it is my least favorite episode this season so far. That's not really saying much, because every episode this season really has been great, and I don't really think there's been a bad episode. However, episode 7, I think, is one of the best episodes they did all season, one of the best by far. I loved everything going on in this episode, and they really, I think everything really came to a halt in this episode. Like, this is really when all the pieces starting to come together, and I really did love seeing that. But basically, episode 7 essentially deals with Anderson, and after Sidney has just carved the pentagram into his chest, for the next 4 episodes, the Reverend Anderson we see here is not the same Reverend Anderson we've seen in the first 6 episodes. The Reverend Anderson in the first 6 episodes was very hopeful. You know, he really thought his exorcisms were going to work, and then he was kind of let down in episode 6, but then he was hopeful again when he realized that maybe they do work, and he was really heading in this hopeful direction. But now, he's completely paranoid, and he feels the best thing to do is to basically cover this up, obviously because he doesn't want to sound crazy, so right away Giles can tell there's something going on. I mean, he's trying to cover this up as best as he can, but it just isn't really working, and I love the way the episode starts with them trying to cover this up in any way, and, you know, Giles is there, Ogden is there. Giles and Ogden get into a bit of a fight, because, of course, Giles suspects Ogden working on the trailer, and him burning the trailer and everything, and they get into this whole fight, and while this is going on, Giles can tell that there's something going on with Anderson. His chest starts bleeding, and he doesn't really know what's going on. And once Ogden leaves, Anderson feels that he can tell Giles this. You know, Giles is one of his most trusted confidants. He's been with Giles all this time, and I like that Giles right away wants to do something. You know, he says, alright, we gotta do something, we gotta take this man to jail, but Anderson basically tells him that that's not gonna do anything, because no, it's not gonna do anything. We're talking about Sidney here. Sidney is not just some normal guy. Sidney is the devil, basically, and if you take the devil to jail, I mean, it's still not gonna change anything. The devil can do anything. He has all these followers, and really taking him in jail isn't really going to do much of anything. But Giles, you know, he still feels the best thing to do is to deal with it that way. So he decides to take Kyle to the burnt trailer and ask him if he can help him exorcise a friend, because he's convinced that Ogden is definitely possessed. The way that Ogden's acting, the way he's being very suspicious, he's convinced that there's definitely that Kyle needs to save him. And we very quickly realize that he's not the one possessed. We'll get into that a little bit later, because basically Anderson's then making out with Patricia, and he encounters Sidney at the barbershop and everything, and he chooses not to do anything. You know, he asks him to join him for poker sometime, because obviously he wants to be somewhat civilized. Sidney wants to act like he's this normal guy, and Anderson's going to do the same thing. Also, because as we know, Sidney said, this is just a warning. The pentagram is meant to be a warning, and if Anderson does anything else, he will absolutely kill him. He's perfectly capable of doing that. He's much more powerful than Kyle and Anderson combined, and that's something I did like seeing. And what I really do like is that Sidney is the villain here, but there's a side of Sidney that isn't really a villain, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to episode 8, but I thought that definitely was very interesting. So I thought that definitely was really well done, the way that this all is done. So as you can tell, like I said, Anderson's really trying to be civilized towards Sidney and basically act like not much is going on, and Kyle ends up locating Ogden at Remembrance Day. That's what most of Episode 7 focuses on, is this whole day called Remembrance Day, which is essentially what you think is the day that people celebrate fallen, people that have fallen, and names that carry deep significance, or just events that have happened in the past. Like, for example, Kyle remembering his marriage. It's not necessarily a death, it's just things that have happened, like Anderson and his son, or Kyle remembering his marriage. I mean, things like that I thought was really interesting to watch, and I think it worked really well for this episode. I think out of all the episodes, this was probably the best one to focus on that subject. I'm very happy that they did, and I think it was the best, like I said, the best one to focus on that. But what ends up happening is Kyle does locate Ogden at Remembrance Day, shakes his hand, nothing ends up happening. So he realizes that he's probably not afflicted, that there's really nothing going on with Ogden. And I like that Ogden's not actually possessed, because it would have been the predictable thing to do. It would have been this ridiculous thing where we've seen him possessed, and we know that he'd probably be better by the end of this episode. So I like that. I like that he actually wasn't possessed by the end of this episode, and maybe Ogden's actually wrong. But we'll get to that in a little bit, because there's more going on there. Basically, we then see after this happens that Kyle discovers very quickly that his wife is actually the one affected. Kat, she's actually the one affected, so she is definitely possessed. She's definitely under Sidney's control, and he doesn't really know what to do there. But then we get to the Remembrance Day Memorial, which is the big, basically, part of this. That's the big part of this episode, where the town mayor reveals the Remembrance Day Memorial, which has been vandalized by a pentagram identical to the one carved on Anderson's chest. And Anderson gets up to speak, and at first he's being kind of normal and everything, just talking about Remembrance Day and celebrating it, but he very quickly starts to break, because he sees Sidney there and feels that this is the time to expose him, and he begins to explain everything between his demonic experiences to the horrified townspeople. And remember, there are already people that think that Anderson's crazy. There are already people that are very much against Anderson. One of the only people that aren't against him is Patricia, and we know her son Aaron, yes, that annoying little shit Aaron, who honestly, I get the purpose of his character. I'm not gonna lie, I get the purpose of his character. I don't like his character. It doesn't make me like his character anymore, but I do get the purpose of his character, because he does play a very big significant role in the last 3 episodes, and this one not so much, but in the last 3 episodes he does. And he points at Sidney, says that he's the one that did this, that he's the devil, and obviously Sidney again is just trying to seem like this civilized guy that's just there for a random reason, and he's saying, he did this to me and everything. And I think this is the perfect example of not people just going along with Sidney. I think they want to just believe that there's nothing evil going on, so they can kind of just feel good about themselves and feel that, there really isn't anything bad happening and that everything is normal, just so that way they don't feel they're as crazy as Anderson, because they know if they say anything that they're going to be just as crazy and they're going to be ridiculed. And that's something I did like seeing here. I thought that was very realistically portrayed. But obviously, no one ends up believing him. Kyle gets him out of there and basically tells him that that was not the time to do that. This was not the right thing to do, and it really was not a smart move. He understands, obviously, why he's doing this, and he understands that he was affected, but he also knows it wasn't a smart move. And I kind of like seeing Kyle end up kind of being a mentor towards Anderson. This started out as Anderson being Kyle's savior, but in the last 4 episodes, Kyle really is the one that saves Anderson in many ways, and I really did like seeing that here. I thought that definitely was very interesting what ended up happening with that. I definitely really did like the way that that all was done, but Kyle basically throughout the next 4 episodes kind of gets everything he wants, because he ends up seeing Allison there, and Allison throughout this entire episode, she's remembering things about Kyle, trying to figure out really what's going on there, and she's experienced more flashbacks to the day that she abused Amber, and she's starting to remember things, and I really did like seeing that, because this is something that Kyle never told her. She kind of is starting to put things together in her head, though, and Allison questions Amber on her picture, why her face is blank, and she responds with she doesn't know which face to draw, and Allison finds this disturbing drawing in Amber's closet of her with the black goo coming out of her mouth, and she remembers right then and there, and that's something I loved. I love that Allison just remembered in that scene, which gives her the perfect opportunity to go to Kyle, and Kyle actually gets what he wants. Just for a few seconds, he actually gets to imagine what his life could be like if he had somewhat of a normal life, because Allison goes to him, and the two actually end up connecting. Not just connecting, but they actually end up having sex, but not before he goes to Amber, and I like this scene with Amber because Amber is just as confused as Kyle. She still feels that Kyle, she knows that Kyle wasn't the one that hurt her. She knows that right off the bat. She knows that it was Allison. Even though Allison has told her that Kyle was the one responsible, she knows straight out that Kyle is the one that, that Allison definitely was the one responsible. And she tells Kyle that she doesn't want to stay with Allison anymore. Kyle tries to explain it was someone else controlling her mom, and basically tells her that this is not, Allison isn't who she thinks she is. That Allison is a good mother, just someone was controlling her, and finally it seems that those two have kind of broken the ice a little bit. And even though they were before, Amber now understands that her mother's not bad, and it gets Kyle to finally make amends with Allison and Amber, which I really did like. Amber said she knows it and saw it leave her, and now they're finally on the same page, and I really did love that, and they end up sleeping together, but everything is pretty much cut short when Kyle the next day wakes up. He's looking for Allison, obviously, because they had sex and everything. He reads this note, and it basically says, I gotta go take care of Amber for me. So she's left. We don't really know where she is. She's disappeared for the next episode. We find out where she is a little bit later, but I thought that was definitely interesting to see, because for the next 3 episodes, for the rest of the season, you get to see Kyle be a genuine father to Amber, and you really do see how great of a father Kyle really is. He really loves his daughter, he really cares about her, and he really does want to be there for her, and I really did like seeing that. I like seeing everyone's reaction, because this is exactly the life they want Kyle to have. They want him to be able to be with his daughter. They want him to be able to be with his wife. They just know, because of everything that's happened, they don't really know if that's the right thing to do. And I did like seeing that. I thought that definitely was very interesting where that went. Now, in order for me to talk about episode 8, I need to talk about what happened with Megan and Mark in the episode, because what's going on there is a whole different story. Because as we know, the investigation is still taking place with the trailer and everything, and we go to Donnie, who, of course, Donnie made that deal with Megan to give, basically to blackmail her into giving him her ring, and basically if she gives him her ring, then he won't say anything. But unfortunately, as we know, there were cameras, and the second we saw that there were cameras there when Mark ended up beating up Donnie, we knew that somehow that was going to play a role into the rest of this season, and it absolutely does. Giles finds the evidence, and right on the spot, just straight up fires Mark, and Mark is no longer a police chief. He now has to spend the rest of the episodes as just Megan's wife, but he also develops a really nice relationship with Kyle, which I really did like seeing. I like seeing Mark actually off the force and actually have to pay those consequences, and that's something the show does very well, is that every action really does have some sort of consequence, and I think that's something that Mark didn't really, I think he always knew that there was a consequence, but he didn't care. This was someone that hurt his wife very deeply. He cared about his wife, and he wanted to do whatever he could to save his wife, and he felt that that was the best thing to do, and she's actually really pissed at him, which I did like seeing. I like seeing that Megan was upset, because she feels that he had no right to do this, and you know, that he feels that he had no right to do this, and that he should have never got himself involved, and that it just wasn't his thing. It wasn't his time to do that. You know, it wasn't the time to hurt Donnie. It wasn't his attack to be had. It wasn't meant she didn't want it to happen. And I like that Megan didn't want this to happen. It's a very good way to set things up for the next 3 episodes, which we'll get into right now. Now, out of all 4 of the episodes, episode 8 is the one that's kind of low-key. Not a ton happens in episode 8. We find out a lot more about Sidney. It's really Sidney's origin story in many ways. We do get some stuff going on, but not a ton of stuff. The main stuff in this episode is seeing Kyle's relation with Amber, and also, you know, of course, dealing with Sidney and everything. But the other biggest part is seeing what's going on with Ogden's wife, because clearly she's possessed, and something is definitely going on there. I like that Kyle was not exactly involved with that at first. I like that he was kind of thrown into the mix. I thought that definitely was interesting, because even though we see this flashback with Sidney, where we see Sidney, he used to be working at this arcade, basically. This was before he got possessed. He was an arcade-owning bachelor, and he had this small boy prisoner in his garage. We don't really know why he was there or what the reason was for the small boy being there, but he was there for some reason. We'll get into that in a little bit. But basically, even though Anderson said to Giles to not arrest Sidney, that's exactly what he ends up doing. He arrests Sidney because he wants to do something. He doesn't just not want to do anything. Even though Anderson says he's not going to do anything, he does it anyway. And Anderson's obviously really pissed because he told Giles specifically not to do this. He goes after him, obviously kind of pissed out of his mind, and you can totally understand what's going on there. I did like that Aaron came forth, and also, I forgot to say in the last episode, Ogden does admit that he's the one that burned the trailer. He finally tells Giles and gets in his face that he was the one that did it, but Patricia's son, you know, Aaron, finally admits that he did paint the pentagram on the town statue, and again, you just see that he has this hatred for Anderson. He feels that all this exorcism stuff is bullshit. He's completely against it, and I just don't like this character. I don't like this character. You're not supposed to like this character. I get the point of him, but I just don't like him. He's really annoying, and he really is my only problem with these last 4 episodes. Had he not been in here, this would have been absolutely perfect. I mean, I just don't really like his character, and they didn't really get us to... I mean, later, they definitely got us to understand why he needs to be here, but at this point, I just found him to be Patricia's annoying son, and I really was not a fan of that. Meanwhile, Megan and Mark, they're having another fight because Mark is blaming this entire thing on her. And I kind of do get his point. The fact that she never said anything, the fact that she kept this from him, I do understand where he's coming from with that. But you kind of think, holy shit, are these two actually going to get a divorce? I mean, it really just seemed like these two might actually get close to getting a divorce. I thought he was going to end up leaving her. I mean, a lot of things end up happening. You don't really know what's going to happen, and I thought that definitely was very interesting that we saw that. I definitely thought that was interesting. Kyle, meanwhile, is with Amber. They're going to visit Sarah, who we haven't seen in a while, but he basically tells her that it wasn't her fault. He realizes that this wasn't her fault. Nothing she did was her fault, that she was under attack, and he understands that, and Amber suggested it might be better if Allison fell into a coma too, which again, I think really Kyle wishes would have happened, because Sarah's someone who he can't really talk to right now, but it might be the best thing if Allison was in a coma, and I thought that definitely was very interesting. And Kyle very quickly realizes that Sidney's definitely been visiting her, because he sees the flowers there, and he knows that obviously something's up there. So this really kind of scares him, because one, he's worried that, holy shit, my mother could still be possessed, and 2, he realizes that there's definitely a connection with Sidney. So he knows that Sarah definitely is most likely still possessed, and that she definitely plays a part in this merge. Well, he doesn't know about the merge yet, but he definitely knows something about that. So Kyle tells Megan that Allison's missing and needs her to watch Amber for the day, and I like the way that they actually develop some sort of genuine relationship here, where Amber goes to Megan, Amber, and Holly very quickly click right away, and I think they did that very well. I definitely really did like that. And Anderson, meanwhile, picks up Ogden's wife when her car breaks down, and they're trying to get something out of her. They're trying to figure out what to do with her, because they know they obviously need to unpossess her, but she just isn't really budging, and not really much happens there. And it just seems like this is someone that they're not going to be able to cure. They can't really get this demon out of her for some reason, and we don't really know because of how long it's been in here, which is interesting. We'll get into that in a little bit. And Kyle does the same thing, lunges at him and tries to get, and we get this really good scene with Kyle and Sidney, which I really did like, because Kyle goes to Sidney, and he's there for two reasons. One, to pin the blame on him for everything that's happened, because everything that's happened to this point has been Sidney's fault. Sidney's been the one that has led all these people to Kyle. Sidney's been the one that's made all these people get possessed. And Sidney's been the one that has this whole group of followers that are after Kyle for this merge nonsense that we don't know about yet. But he also wants to save him because he knows that Sidney isn't really the devil. That Sidney as well is just possessed. And he wants to save him, but he just can't. It doesn't really seem to do anything. And I like what Sidney says, that if he takes this out of him, that he will leave behind a monster. And I kind of get what he's trying to say, that obviously Sidney is the host, as we know, and if he gets the demon out of him, it could go into anyone, and who it's going to go into, it's not going to end, whoever it goes into, it's going to be bad. It's not going to end well for anyone if whoever it goes into. And Kyle ends up releasing him, realizing he can't really do anything, which I understand, obviously, why Kyle did that. And Sidney partially explains that he lands where he lands, just has to make the best of it. And he goes to clarify that only happens to people around Kyle because he's like a match in a dark forest that his kind are attracted to. And he also suggests that he should have learned to live with his possessed mother instead of beating her, that he maybe should have just lived with it. And that's definitely very interesting. And we get this other scene where Sidney, it's right before he became possessed. He discovers the horror in his garage, and we're starting to think that maybe this kid, maybe he didn't kidnap him, maybe this kid just got into his garage. I mean, we don't really know what's going on there. And it's still by the end of the episode, we don't fully know what's going on with that, but that's not really what's important. It's more showing who Sidney really was and who he really used to be before he was possessed. And that's something I think they showed very well in this episode. So meanwhile, Anderson is kidnapped. Kat, at this point, he's got her inside the house, and he's trying to, again, get something out of her. Aaron's watching this entire thing. Aaron comes up with this ridiculous bullshit lie that Anderson somehow carved the pentagram into his own chest, and that he kidnapped Ogden's wife. And I don't really know, again, Anderson, I mean, like I said, Aaron is so against Anderson. It's really annoying to watch at this point. That is until we get to episode 9 when things get a little more interesting. But Kyle returns to his house and, sees Anderson's hostage situation, what's happened there. Ogden then meets up with Giles, and he actually admits to him everything. He admits that his wife is possessed, along with half a dozen people in town, and we very quickly realize what the trailer's all about. It's all been for basically hiding them, that it was there to help them ride out their difficult moments anytime they turn into a beast, or anytime they, because obviously we know when you're possessed, your worst part of you comes out, and whenever they had outbursts or something happened, they just went into that trailer, and that's probably what all the blood and all the nails are about. It's all been for them, which I think is very interesting that we saw that, and it kind of shows that this case in general wasn't as big as a deal as Mark thought, and it doesn't feel like it's pointless either. It totally makes sense why we had it in the first place, because again, Mark wanted to believe that this was simply just a case, that he wanted to believe this was a murder case or something happened there, and I like that we realized by the end, there was no case. There really wasn't. It was simply that he was storing people in there to keep them from getting possessed, to, help them with their possessions, and he's kind of been the head of it all, which is definitely interesting. But it does make us wonder if he knows Sidney, and if he's been working with Sidney, because definitely something's been happening there, and I think that definitely is interesting. And obviously, Giles doesn't believe what Aaron said, and meanwhile, Kyle's trying to help Anderson get this demon out of Kat. Nothing seems to be working, even when he tries calming him down. There is a fight we see. Giles and Ogden show up. They actually get into a whole fight about it, because Kyle tries leaving with her. He's trying to tell Anderson that they might not be able to save her and nothing's going to happen. But Anderson's determined. He punches him outside, which I thought this was a bit unnecessary. I'm not going to lie. I don't really think there was a reason for them to fight. I think it was kind of just there. But Giles and Ogden break it up very quickly. Giles tries calming him down, but Anderson ends up driving off, unfortunately. So that doesn't end up well, as we see. Meanwhile, Mark does end up coming back and tells Megan that he sold his truck so she could get her wedding ring back after selling it to pay for Donnie's blackmail money, which I thought definitely was very interesting. And I like that we see that he says, you know, that she wasn't the one at fault, that this isn't her fault at all. She needs to understand that, and I like that we saw that. So Giles, we see, has released Sidney from prison, but warns that he will cross the line to protect his friends, and that night Anderson learns that the church council wants him out of town, and Sidney returns home to find Aaron in his house, who confesses that he's the one who lied to Giles to get him out, we realize, which I think is definitely very interesting we found that out. And Kyle, actually, by the end of the episode, again, seems like things are going well for him, where he gets to enjoy a whole meal with his daughter and Megan's family for the first time in a while, and we also get closure about Sidney's kidnapped child. Once he became possessed, he broke in the garage, set him free, and it makes us wonder how evil he really is, because it clearly seems like Sidney knows that he's possessed, and he knows that he has this demon in him, but he clearly doesn't want to show it to everyone. Whoever he cares about, he tries to hide it from, and I think we're definitely seeing that Sidney's not really a bad man. He's just kind of a broken man. There really is no saving him right now, because the host is stuck in him, and I think it is kind of hinting that at some point the host is probably going to leave Sidney. Now, when that's going to be, we don't really know, but I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen there. You know, we'll get into that later when we get to episode 10 and everything, but that's basically everything that happens in episode 8. Now let's get to episode, like I said, not a ton happens in episode 8, a lot of reveals, such as the trailer. That's really the only really big thing that happens, but now we get to episode 9, which is really when things start to kick into high gear. If episode 8 was a low-key episode, episode 9 and 10 absolutely make up for it. There is so much shit that goes down in episodes 9 and 10 that this review might be 15 minutes just because of all the stuff that happens, especially in episode 9, which I think is the perfect example of a penultimate episode. I mean, there is so much going on here. Very quickly, Ogden and Kat are about to skip town, but not before Ogden warns Giles he could have protected him from what's coming. That definitely hints that he knows of the evil that's ahead, and we don't really know what that's going to be or what's happening there, but Kyle then questions Megan about playing hooky from her job because she's not at her job for some reason, and there's something weird going on with Megan, and I liked seeing that. I like seeing that Kyle is now questioning Megan, because it's now a complete role reversal from the beginning of the season. You know, Megan was the one successful, while Kyle was the one that was hiding out, not wanting to face the world, and now it's Megan that doesn't really want to do anything, and Megan is kind of this mess we see throughout this whole episode. We don't really know what's happening with her, but there's something very strange going on with Megan. It seems like she's just about to crack, and we don't really know. In fact, the beginning of this episode, we see her, she goes to, like, the glass that she's breaking, and she, like, breaks the glass. She clenches the glass. All this blood comes out of her hand, and she thinks back to all the events that she's been through. Very interesting scene, but that ties in at the end of the episode. We find out what's going on there. Patricia, meanwhile, wants Anderson to move in because she wants a sense of normalcy, because he doesn't have any, she doesn't have much either, and she feels the best thing to do is for him to move in, because she feels that normalcy is what she wants, and very quickly that ends when Aaron tries to make her think that she can't trust Anderson, and Anderson kind of attacks Aaron to make her think that, you know, that obviously to show her that Aaron is just playing her and that she can't trust him, because again, Aaron's trying to prove this lie that Anderson is this horrible monster and that he has no idea what he's talking about and he's a complete fraud. And again, it's an interesting storyline. I do like where this ends up going, that he wants everyone to think that he's a fraud, but Anderson, again, he's trying to prove to everyone that Sidney is who he is, and they get into this whole fight and everything where Sidney, he ends up attacking Sidney. Sidney does end up pressing charges. He even tells Giles to take him to jail, but again, Giles knows that Anderson's innocent, and so he literally he's about to take him to jail, literally lets him go after 2 seconds and says, if you need anything, call me. So I really do like the way that's done. Giles and Anderson really do have this bond that can't be broken, and I think it's definitely something we're going to see throughout the entire show, is that they're really, I don't really think there's anything that's ever going to be able to break that bond. I think that's definitely true. Kyle is trying to enroll Amber in school because he feels that's the best thing for her. It's kind of hard for her, though, mainly because of the fact that she hasn't been in school for so long, but just a nice scene. I like the way that was done. I like seeing Megan having to take care of Amber and Holly. I thought that definitely was interesting to see. Meanwhile, Kyle and Mark kind of go on this hunt to find Allison, and I like seeing Mark, now that he's no longer a cop, can do all these crazy things. I thought that was a lot of fun to watch, and I love the line where he said one of the perks of not not being a cop, breaks into the house. I thought that was very funny. And she's not in the house, we see. She's not there. But he does see Allison's mother, Lauren, and begs her not to call the police, obviously because she thinks that Kyle, again, is responsible for what happened with Amber, but she very quickly realizes that she blames Kyle for changing Allison, but ends up telling him that where she's been, and I like the way that he was able to get her to release information. Allison, we realize, has checked herself into a mental institution, and you understand this, really. I can understand why Allison did this. After all the shit she's been through, she feels she's caused a lot of stuff, and it's kind of the conclusion of Allison for now. I don't know if this is the very end of Allison, but it very much seems like we're not going to see Allison for a while after this scene, because Kyle does find Allison, and he promises that she's not sick, and that she should return home to the family. Oh, I also forgot to say, in episode 8, Kyle finally admits to Megan what happened with Allison and everything that went down, which I like seeing, because as we know, she wasn't believing in this demon stuff, but after episode 8, she actually seems to be cool with Kyle, and it seems like she is kind of believing him, but she's also reeling from it this entire episode, and we definitely do see that, and I thought that definitely was interesting. But Allison, basically, we have this really good scene where Allison's afraid of causing more harm. She's worried she's going to do something else. Even though she's not possessed, she's worried she is going to lash out again. She basically tells him that the best thing to do is to take care of Amber, leave her out of it, and that's exactly what he decides to do, mainly because he loves her. I thought that was a very well done scene, and I really did like the way that was done. It's sad to see, obviously, because I was hoping by the end of the season that Kyle and Allison would be together and maybe he'd get to live that life with her, but unfortunately for right now, he can't be with her, and maybe after, you know, maybe next season he'll be able to get back with her, and maybe they'll be okay again, but again, I feel like any future he has with her is somewhat fictional. Any perfect life he has is fictional. I think that's what Kyle wants, but I think he's very quickly starting to realize that that's very fictional, and it's not going to happen in the way he wants it to, and he needs to respect that. So I like the way he did respect Allison. He realizes that he does need to raise Amber, and I like that Amber stays in the picture, because Amber becomes a lot more interesting after this episode, which I'll talk about. Basically, Aaron's hanging out with Sidney. We see, like I said, Anderson's kind of, you know, he gets kicked out by Patricia. Meanwhile, we see Kat's taking Ogden to carry out Sidney's plans because Ogden knows of all the possessed people, and they're gonna try something, we see. So I thought that definitely was interesting. Then we get this really big confrontation between Mark and Megan, because that's the main stuff going on this episode. Well, not the main stuff, but the biggest thing in this episode to talk about, obviously, is what's going on between Mark and Megan. Now, there are two key scenes in this episode. The first scene involves Mark and Megan, because Mark wants to know why she's not going to school. She's vomiting at school, and there's definitely something going on there, and she very quickly reveals that she's pregnant, and Mark begs her not to get an abortion, and reasons this baby can be a fresh start for them. He feels that after everything they've been through, that this can be a fresh start, and he really feels that this will be, you know, their that this will be their, you know, fresh start. This will be them starting over. This will be them getting to repair their marriage, because obviously it's kind of broken right now. But before anything else can happen, the worst possible scenario ends up happening when Megan ends up possessed. She becomes this, she goes through this demonic episode while she's taking a shower, and Mark comes in worried, Megan obviously, and before anything else, she bashes his head through the mirror. He collapses, starts bleeding out from his neck, and Mark's dead right there. Mark's just dead. They actually killed off Mark. I was freaking out when this happened, but honestly, I get it. Mark served his purpose. Mark did what he needed to do. Mark was a character that did all he could do for Megan. In the end, he did serve his purpose. I think they really did develop his character in the best way possible. They showed that even though he does things, you know, he crosses some lines, and he does get violent. He's not afraid to get violent. He does care about Megan. He'll do anything to support her. He'll do anything to stay on her side, and at the end, he died trying to save her, and I think it's very sad to see, especially Megan, who doesn't realize that she's possessed, obviously, because when you're possessed, you don't realize you're possessed, and you forget about it, and it's very sad to see. I felt, you know, and then things get really big at the end of the episode. Once right away, Amber calls Kyle, says something's going on with Megan. She's acting exactly like how Allison did. Freaks Kyle out. That perfectly sets us up for the season finale. And we're going to talk about the season finale right now. So if you guys have not seen the season finale, the rest of this episode, I am going to talk about the season finale. I'm going to talk about everything that went down in the season finale, because damn is there a lot to talk about. And let's get into it. So the season finale for me is by far the best episode this season's ever done. Why? Because it brings everything together. All the possessions, everything that's happening, all the possessions, starting from Joshua all the way to Megan being possessed, are all discussed in this episode. Pretty much every character we've seen from the season appears in this episode, and everything is pretty much closed out, and it really sets us up for next season, which I absolutely loved. I loved the way this finale was done. I thought this was a very thrilling, scary finale, honestly, because seeing Megan possessed, I mean, Ren Schmidt did an incredible job at being this just really wretched and disgusting and evil creature. Was really well done. You haven't seen this side of Megan before. You've seen, I mean, again, you knew she was going batshit throughout the entire episode, so you can kind of see that was going to happen, but it was nothing I ever expected to happen. I never really expected for Megan to be possessed, but it's kind of foreshadowed because Kyle has this scene with Anderson where he says, everyone I care about becomes possessed, and that's true, it has happened, but we just haven't really seen it for ourselves because we've only heard about it. But finally now we are getting to see it, and it's really not the most pleasant thing ever. It's very ugly, actually. Mark, we realize, is officially dead. Very sad to watch. Holly and Amber are freaking out because Amber's been through this before. Holly has no idea what's going on, and I love seeing Holly in this position because Holly's the one that has no idea what's going on. Amber, however, she knows what to do. She calls Kyle for help. Megan finds them, and the call drops, and Kyle and Anderson are frantically rushing over. They have no idea what to do. They discover Mark's body and thankfully find Amber and Holly unharmed. Luckily, none of them are dead, and Amber saying that she was just like Allison, and Amber recalls to Kyle on what happened and everything. So I thought that definitely was a very well done scene. Really like the way that was done. But they go to Giles, obviously, because they need something to be done. They need someone to look after the girls while they try to go save Megan. And I love the conversation that Kyle and Anderson have when they're in that car. Like I said, that really is why his finale is so great, because when they're in that car, they're having a discussion about every exorcism they've had and how Kyle realizes that some you just can't save. It depends on how long. Someone like, say, what's now I can't think of his name, Blake, someone like Blake, you know, he's been possessed for years and years, and that's why they couldn't save him. However, someone like Sherry is in a coma, and if he did save her, like Kyle says, there'll be a part of her that's gone, so he really doesn't want to take that chance. Megan, however, is someone that's just recently become possessed, so saving her, he should be able to do, and I was really thinking that he might not be able to save her, but that wouldn't make sense, obviously, because the show just told us it depends how long they were possessed for, and someone like Sidney has pretty much been possessed for a while, we have to assume. So I'm assuming that Sidney, I don't really know if Sidney will ever be unpossessed. We'll have to see. I think the only way for Sidney to be unpossessed is if he kills himself, which I kind of think is going to happen by next season, at least. I definitely kind of hinted that, but Kyle, Anderson, the kids, they show up at Giles' home to explain the situation, ask him to cover up the murder, because obviously they don't want Megan to go to jail. They wanted him to know what's going on. They tell him to cover up the murder in the best way he can, and I like that Giles does agree to do that. And Aaron, meanwhile, he's breaking into Sidney's house, asks him to help with the merge, and Aaron in this situation is just a liability. He really is. And I like that in the end, that's all Aaron was. He was just a liability. He was someone for Sidney to blame. He was someone for Sidney to pin the blame on. He was also someone for Sidney to use along the way that he could just, you know, because they both have a purpose, and that's to go after Anderson, because they don't want to go after Kyle, obviously, but they do want to go after Anderson. They have a deep hatred for Anderson. They both want to go after him, and we definitely see that here. And all the pieces are pretty much set up in the very beginning of this episode, which I really did like. And Sidney beats Kyle and Anderson to the chase. We see they're trying to clean up the Mark scene and locates Megan in Kyle's pantry. Sidney basically gets into Megan's head, says everything's going to be okay. I'm like, oh shit, he's going to try to get her into the merge. And Aaron does carry out Sidney's errand, breaks into Giles' house to kidnap Amber, and Kyle and Amber get locked into this, like, I want to say pantry sort of, but it's such a good scene because Kyle has no idea what's going on in the scene. And that scene where Kyle and Amber are both locked up in there, and him saying he doesn't really know, him not knowing what the merge is about or what's going on. A lot of people are talking about, oh, we didn't find out what the merge is about, or we didn't really understand why Kyle has these powers. Again, this is only the first season. The point of this first season is for Kyle to understand his true purpose, and it's clear that he's very quickly realizing his true purpose. He doesn't know what the merge is, but he knows that he's obviously involved with this somehow, and he knows the only way to save Megan is for him to do his thing. So luckily, very quickly, Anderson does rescue Amber and Kyle, which I thought was a very well done scene because at any point something bad could happen. You know, Sidney does end up attacking Anderson, which was a very crazy scene, the way that was done, the way they start attacking each other. I thought was just really crazy to watch. And like I said, there's so much chaos going on here. Sidney's waiting for him on the side of the road, and Sidney instructs him to get the trunk of his car if he wants to see his daughter again. And like I said, he's taken to that basement, and I love the way this next scene was done because Anderson locates the basement, bypasses Cat, breaks the door, and Ogden immediately attacks him. Kyle finally does break free, and Megan finds Amber hiding in the room, prompting Kyle to set his sights on his own sister. And obviously, Megan tries to suck her soul. When Kyle, before Kyle's about to save her, Amber leaps on her back and is able to get the demon out of her. So we realize that Amber is a whisperer too. She has the same kind of powers that Kyle does. And I don't know if this was a genetics thing or if she just kind of developed it, but she also is someone that can save demons. Now, this was an incredible twist. I really did love that. It showed why Amber's been such a major part of this season and why she's been in these last 4 episodes so much, because she's been a demon whisperer, and I like the way that was done. They do, in fact, cure Megan. Megan does get the demon out of her, and she realizes that Mark's dead, and it's a very sad scene, but luckily, I like seeing that they were able to save Megan. They take her to the police station, and Anderson ends up torching Sidney's entire trailer, but someone's trapped inside, and most likely that person is Aaron, which I really hope it is Aaron, because I just don't think he really has too much to do. Patricia tells Anderson that someone's missing. He's freaking out because he's thinking that he might just killed Aaron. He notices that Sidney drives by, confirming that the man he burned the trailer wasn't Sidney. It might have been Aaron. Holy shit, because he meant to kill Sidney, but it's Aaron, so this can't end well, obviously. So obviously Anderson most likely killed Aaron, but we'll have to see what happened there. I hope he did, because again, I just really was never a fan of the character. Even though they tried to justify his character toward the end, again, to me, he just came across as a liability. So I don't really think his character, he was necessary, definitely. He had a purpose, but I just never really liked his character. And I like the way the season ends with Kyle and Amber deciding that they're not going to just continue what they're doing. They're going to go on a road trip to find a place where people don't know about, as he calls them, their superpowers. You know, he wants to get away from it, wants to find a place to go, and he says eventually they'll pick up Allison and Megan and Holly along the way. Megan's still pregnant, you know, she's still having that baby, so we'll have to see what happens with that. But before anything can happen, they stop at this gas station. He's about to get her a Slurpee, and we see literally everyone is just staring at them, and we don't know what this is about, but that is the way the season ends. Incredible end overall. Let's talk about this season and predictions for next season. So like I said, these last 4 episodes for me, I think really were among the best. I think they really just kicked everything into high gear. All the possessions, all the emotion, everything was just packed, especially into this finale. I think it's one of the most perfect finales I've seen in a while. I love the way it was done. Let's talk about this group of people, though, because I am 100% convinced that these people have something to do with the merge. And I don't know exactly what it is, but clearly I'm pretty sure this has to do with the merge. We don't really know what the merge is yet, which is something that I like. I like that we kind of do. We know that obviously it involves sucking Kyle's soul and trying to get more life out of them. We know obviously if you're dying, you have to suck someone's soul who's living, who's not possessed. So I don't really know what the merge involves, but I'm pretty sure we're going to find out. And I like that we don't know what the merge is yet. I think it's just interesting that we don't know that yet. What is the extent of Amber's powers, though? We don't really know how easy, if she can maybe get demons out easily, or if it's going to be harder for her. I mean, that's going to be interesting to see what happens with that, but I'm looking forward to seeing more of Kyle and Amber together. I think, like Kyle and Anderson were together this season, Kyle and Amber are going to have that relationship next season. I'm looking forward to seeing how that's going to be. Anderson's kind of off doing his own thing, but he's also probably going to be very terrified because, holy shit, he might have just killed Aaron, and I hope Aaron's dead, honestly, because like I said, I just didn't like the character. But obviously, there's going to be some sort of consequence. Either he's not going to end with Patricia, which would be very sad because I did like Patricia overall, but I don't really know what's going to happen there. That's going to be very interesting. Sidney's still in town. What's going to happen now that Sidney's still in town? I think definitely there's going to be a lot of tension between Anderson and Sidney. I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen with that. I think the biggest up-in-the-air question, though, is Megan. What's Megan doing next season? You know, Mark's dead. She knows she killed Mark. She knows about the exorcism. You know, she knows she's possessed and everything. So where is she going? What's she going to do? We don't really know, and I like that this season doesn't really tell us where she's headed. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen with Megan next season, because I don't really know. Is Allison going to get out of that mental hospital? I mean, I'm hoping that eventually she will be able to get out of there. I don't really know, but we'll have to see what happens with that. That's going to be very interesting. And then Ogden as well. Again, we don't really know where that's headed, what Ogden's going to be doing. I'm pretty sure that Ogden and Kat will continue recruiting possessions and keep doing that sort of thing, so I think that's going to be interesting. I still can't believe they killed Mark. I honestly can't believe, but I really do give them the balls. You know, it's a very ballsy decision, but I like that they stuck with it. I like that they didn't just say, oh, he's not dead. I like they actually did kill him off, and it was interesting the way that was done. Overall, I love this season. I'm not gonna lie, guys. I absolutely love this season. And like I said, out of all the new shows I watched, this was my favorite. This was the one that was most consistent for me. This is the one that was most invested in the characters. And the main reason I love the show is the main reason I wanted to watch Outcast in the first place is because it gave us everything that I want in The Walking Dead. It was a much more character-driven series. It was a lot more emotional. And while it did have very scary moments throughout the episode, I mean, nothing's more scarier than your loved one becoming possessed or something like that. Even the opening, I mean, I'll never forget that opening. That opening is still one of the most shocking things I've seen in a while. This show, at its core, I think really was an emotional season, and I really did love that. I loved seeing the different emotions, and also the transformation of Kyle, from him completely unwilling to do these possessions and wanting to remain in his house and basically just be a bum, to actually wanting to do something and actually wanting to provide for his family and save everyone and be the savior of all this, and he wants to be involved. I think it was just a very interesting transition. I love seeing this story. I thought overall that was very well done. I guess the only other question I'm going to say right now is Sarah. What's going to happen with Sarah? Can Kyle ever save her? I don't really know. That's going to be interesting as well if he can save her. But like I said, I absolutely love this season. I think this really was a fantastic season. For me, this will definitely be in my top 10 best summer shows without a doubt when I make that list. The main reason I actually binge this is because I'm trying to watch most of the summer shows and finish them so I can make that list very quickly because I want to do my fall preview. You guys don't care about that. But anyways, Outcast for me, I really did love this show overall. Like I said, it's my favorite new show of the summer, and I am definitely going to give Outcast a 4.5 out of 5 or an A. The only reason I didn't give it a 5 out of 5 is because of the fact that I do feel that some of the episodes were a little bit inconsistent or redundant. Definitely there was some redundancy, especially with Kyle and Anderson. There was a lot of them believing, non-believing, things like that. A lot of that stuff kept going on throughout the episodes, as well as Aaron. Aaron, which is the character that never really clicked for me. I never was a huge fan of him, and I just didn't like him. But other than that, guys, I absolutely love the season. I think this was an amazing season overall. I can't wait for season 2, and definitely was everything I hoped it would be and more. It was honestly so much better than I thought it was going to be. I remember I didn't really think this series was going to be that great, but it ended up being so much better, so much scarier, and just so much more compelling than I thought it would, and honestly became one of my favorite horror shows on TV by far, as well as I think the best show that Robert Kirkman is currently doing right now. But overall, guys, that's it. Outcast is now over. I am officially caught up. I'm very happy that I'm caught up. Let me know what you guys thought of this season overall. What are your predictions for next season? Love to hear your thoughts on it. What did you guys think of my reviews all season? I know this was a very long review, but again, I had to review 4 episodes, so I guess you can't really blame me for that. But anyways, guys, let me know what you guys thought of the season. Love to hear your thoughts on it. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for Stranger Things. Yes, I am going to catch up on Stranger Things. I promise you I will. I meant to review episode 3 way back. I, again, just never got to it, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.